I'm Jason Goliath.
And I'm Nicholas Goliath.
And this is a new podcast called The Happiness Economy, where we try and unpack, figure out, investigate, interrogate, I think holistically understand what is happiness even.
What is it to you? What is it to me? Is it different? Is it the same? What do you do to chase your happiness? Just chase it. We want to chat to people who we believe have found their happiness or are on the way to finding their happiness and find out what it is that makes them happy.
So, if you're happy, we're happy. The Happiness Economy with Nicholas and Jason Goliath. Tell her what you must.
Today we have Dan Nicholl. Nicholas, before we even make eye contact with Dan, I want you to know that Dan Nicholl is, I think, easily the most interesting person that I know. And you've got to consider that I know a lot of people. So let me give you the top level specs. Rhodesian, Zimbabwean, just is in terms of the time history scale. Irish
Zimbabwean.
Irish Zimbabwean, educated in Australia, sports journalist in South Africa. Nobody that I know has had 16 seasons.
16 seasons.
16 seasons of anything on TV, because I don't know anybody from Days of Our Lives or Bold and the Beautiful. Okay, 16 seasons. But then also manages to be one of the nicest people I've ever met, one of the best friends I've ever made, one of the best fathers and husbands that I've ever observed, and also somebody that goes out of his way to do nice things for people, all in one beautiful, highly sarcastic man. Dan Nicholl.
That is a very generous snapshot, and some of it's vaguely accurate, so thank you.
No, which parts are not true? I think the whole thing... The whole thing is, and I only said Rhodesian because of the timeline, not because of what you celebrate or stand for. So Irish Zimbabwean. And his sister is the mayor of, where is it?
She was the Lord Mayor of Belfast in Northern Ireland.
Lord Mayor.
Which was deeply annoying because up until that point I was the cool and famous one in the family. And then at the age of 33, she just careered in and took over Northern Irish politics and became the cool one.
So I mean, I was expecting her to be the stuck-up one. And then she's more down-to-earth than you are.
Yeah, I'm pretty certain she's adopted. My parents argue otherwise. She's just far too perfect. Yeah, she's lovely, and I'm very fortunate. Thank you to be part of joining you two, and joining you two in the immediate aftermath of having watched the show that emerged out of your podcast, the Happiness Economy Comedy Tour.
Yes,
and I have to congratulate you because I do remember, and you won't thank me for bringing this up, but during the 206-year period of lockdown. The three of you, the two of you, and then that other one who's interning at Netflix.
Yes.
The three of you put together you put together a show, an online comedy show.
Yes.
And it was an interesting collaboration that suggested that you'd perhaps gathered 10 minutes before you went online. And it was actually a lot of fun, but I was kind of expecting something similar where you were just sort of freestyling a bit, and you actually brought together one of the most remarkable performances I've seen in a long time, because you're both incredibly funny. You both know that. Nicholas, your accidental appendectomy. Jason, you parasailing at 138 kilograms above a struggling steamship off the coast of Mauritius. Hilarious stories. But it's when you two start philosophizing, and not in a deeply holier-than-thou kind of way, but just taking the stories of your respective lives and plugging them into kind of real-life understanding of the challenges we face. I think everybody that evening, including my son's godfather, who you know well, who does not mince his words, he's a counsel and an acting judge, we all came away realising that beyond the good looks and the laughs that you churn out effortlessly, they're two pretty sharp minds that delivered some well-worked wisdom, and it was a joy to watch.
I appreciate all of that English. and especially coming from you, because I know that it's true. The show that we did during lockdown was terrible. It was sheer desperation.
Is that the comedy show? Not
The first comedy show. No, the first comedy show that we did.
That was a perfect example of not staying in our lane. Of looking around and seeing what people are doing, what's working, and thinking that because it's being done, we also have to do.
So at the time, Mark Lottering had just did the highest grossing ticket sales, I think, of his career.
Yeah.
Did like 17,000 ticket sales for one online show. Skulk had just did his third show of 5,000 people.
Yeah.
Alfred just did his first show of 5,000 people. And Dan, what you didn't understand when you watched the show, generally, so the happiness economy on stage was something that we were moved to do from our core, almost, and somebody articulated it as a calling. The show that we did during lockdown, we were called by our debit orders and nothing else. It was
nobody answered the call.
It was because we saw other comedians making money.
Yeah.
But I also think when you do something like that, I'm not sure what you guys are like, but we do a lot of MC work.
Yeah.
Yours is a lot of the out-and-out comedy space. I do a lot of stuff on stage. I generally prefer not sharing the stage with somebody else, not because I'm jealous of it, but because my approach to it is I tend to go off in interesting spaces. And I've looked across the stage and seen the look of utter panic on my co-host who's not from this kind of space going, that's not on the script. Sorry, you just read about the CEO, we're going to get shot. And so when you're trying to come together in that kind of comedy space, if it is the improv kind of space, that's one thing.
Yeah.
But a one-man show is far more, I won't say scripted, but worked on than most people realise. You put a lot of time and energy into it. It's the reason I've never gone into comedy. A, I'm not nearly as funny as you guys, but B, you actually have to do some work, and that's something I try and avoid doing.
Lies.
And if you create that show, it's a lot of effort. Whereas if you're trying to now do two people doing a one-man show together, or in your case, three people who may or may not be related doing a one-man show together, that's a really hard puzzle to try and get the pieces together for.
It's nearly impossible, particularly if you're doing it as the way we did it and as you picked up completely unrehearsed.
Yeah.
So the ease with a one-man show is generally you've run the content and generally you understand what your rhythm is going to be in every situation. So depending on what the audience is, you understand what that rapport is supposed to be. But you also, I think, understand how to get yourself out of trouble. So if you're on your own and things start going bad, you know how to kind of rescue it. But when you've not only got to be sensitive to somebody else's pace, it is very, very difficult. And I think that's what excited us about this particular show is because Nick and I were so immersed in the content, the structure of the show almost seemed to build itself, and it felt like we had a very good rapport on stage from opening night, simply because I think for the first time we walked on stage as equals, where normally we'd walk on stage as whatever our role in that particular show is. So if I'm hosting and Nick's headlining, there's a role to be played, and you'd kind of position yourself to the audience in the same way, or vice versa. We're here for the same time. For the first time, we came on stage as absolute equals. But I see what you're doing. Dan Nicholl is a professional interviewer,
just about to say.
and he's trying to deflect all of these questions onto us. The reason we do this podcast is we're inviting people who we perceive to be happy, people who we perceive to have it together. And whether that perception be from what we've experienced from you on television, from a social media perspective, or the experience that we've had from being in your presence. The compliment I want to pay you, Dan, is that you always seem to have it together. Like you always seem to be a couple of steps ahead. You feel, and I mean, I know because I'm your friend that you put extreme amounts of effort into everything you do, but you also feel like you put a lot of effort into everything that means something to you. It results in happy, well-adjusted kids, a wife that works too hard but adores you. We've seen the way she looks at you. None of us can understand it.
Cataract surgery coming up later this year.
Done.
But until then, I'm good.
No, even me, I'm just feeding my throat the sugar. They say diabetes makes your eyes blur. I've also just been feeding it. So I wanna unpack all of those things and perhaps learn a little bit about Dan. You seem to have a deep appreciation for the moments in life. Is that the truth?
I think it really is. And you mentioned social media. It's no secret that the prism of social media allows us to project things as always being
100%.
perfect and wonderful.
No one ever missed a debit order on Instagram.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like I spend my life traveling the world. I've actually got a green screen in my garage and I haven't left home in 8 years. No, I'm very fortunate. And I was listening to a podcast. I've become absolutely addicted. Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend is the crack cocaine of podcasting
Love
at
it.
the moment.
Love Conan.
Listen to it every single day. And in fact, he was the guy who inspired me to take the Dan Nicholl show into a podcast space. And I'll explain why I'm loving that so much a little later. But he had an interview with Liam Neeson, and he asked Liam Neeson about being happy. And Liam Neeson said, well, you can't be happy all the time.
Truth.
But he tries to be content all the time.
Yes.
And I think understanding kind of what contentment is for you and what then generates happiness from that. I've had a remarkably fortunate life. I was born in Belfast in Northern Ireland. We left when I was 4 years old. The Troubles in Northern Ireland meant that it was a very fractured place. It was not an easy place to live. It is still a troubled place, not as much as then perhaps, but still more than people realise. And we left, and at that stage there were two options. My father was a teacher. My mother is South African. There were two countries we could have moved to. One of them was the then newly independent Zimbabwe. There was one other option, and that was the one that my parents actually wanted.
Yeah.
And they waited, and they waited, and they waited, and the confirmation didn't come through. They accepted the job in Zimbabwe, and a day later, a letter came through from the Seychelles government. And so I could have been a lifeguard in the Seychelles, which I think was a more natural calling.
How
But
boring,
instead,
No, but also, can you picture Dan blooming in the Speedo the whole day, every day?
Just teasing you as you're drowning. Wow, what are you doing in the water? So you're supposed to only go in if you can swim.
I would have been a French David Hasselhoff on the Seychelles beaches. But yeah, arrived in Zimbabwe. I grew up there and grew up in quite rural communities, some time in Harare, but mostly a little town called Kwekwe, kind of the one shop, a small hotel. The horse had left town, really small, and then a place called Marandera. And through all of that time, and I look back now through where my kids are, it was a wonderfully innocent and very naive time. I think we got a television when I was 12. We got a car when I was 14. Life was very, very, very simple and wonderfully so. And you spent a lot of time kind of hanging out with yourself and trying to convince your younger sister to play cricket. And that was the life that you led. But through all of that time, through school and then through to when I was 16, you referenced Australia. I lived in Australia for a year. There's still the occasional linguistic scar that emerges in conversation. I was lucky enough to get a scholarship to go on a Rotary Youth Exchange and spent a life-changing year in Australia discovering the world at large, and then came back 2 more years at school realising I've really got to work hard if I'm going to get to university because my parents wouldn't have been able to afford it. So I've got to get a scholarship, and there was one scholarship through our school, and I worked really, really hard, and with a bit of luck and good fortune was able to get that. That took me down to the University of Cape Town. When I was there, I got introduced to somebody around a restaurant and I was able to get a job as a waiter, a barman, and occasionally, very unsuccessfully, as a bouncer. The only reason I succeeded at that stage, you wouldn't believe it now, I had the figure of a malnourished Skulk Bezuidenhout and the hair of an unwashed Kenny G.
I can't picture you as a bouncer. I can't picture you as an enforcer.
Well, generally, I think people look, he's so scrawny, his hair is so
must
awful,
know
he's got
something.
3 earrings, there must be something dangerous about him. We're just going to give him a skip. But to get through all of that, and then when I started working in radio, started working in television, had people believe in me, say, yep, Dan, we don't really know you, but yes, you can MC our event. Yes, we'll give you a crack at hosting Champions League on ETV.
Let's take a quick pause there at
'Cause you're
the
giving us
radio.
the
Let's
entire
take
story.
a quick pause there. So Marcel Gordon, a good friend of ours and a
Former colleague of mine.
your former colleague of yours, and Donovan's sister-in-law, will give up her whole CV, and ENCA news presenter. She's got a show. Told me the most fascinating story because you just said that you had to work incredibly hard. And I don't think the perception, because you're so good, I think the perception, anybody looking in feels that you don't. So Marcel tells a story of being on radio with Dan in the early days. Dan's doing the sports, which is something that we're about to get into. They all arrive at this time because of the time with scripts and things printed out. Dan arrives to do his broadcast with a couple of chicken scratches on a piece of paper, and then he's more articulate than anybody who's prepared a script. So apparently it was quite frustrating to observe, because imagine you come to work, you've done all your homework.
Yeah, but he's got that global appeal. He's been from everywhere in the world, has all the different accents, all the different skills that he's picked up. Taught his sister how to play cricket in the way it could have been in the... Because that was... before we even get there, I want to talk about during that time. So you moved from Belfast because of drama in the world at that time. Are you aware of how serious it is? What are your parents telling you? Because my question is, how do you experience your happiness in that time? Because, I mean, I'm sure surely for your parents it's chaotic trying to find a place to live. And you're just a kid. What do your parents teach you at that time? What are they sharing with you in terms of information? And how much do you actually know about what's going on in the world around you? Like you said, you only got a TV at 12. So how does that influence your happiness?
I think that first stretch... The memories are very few. I left Northern Ireland before I was 4.
Yeah.
We lived in London for 6 months and then moved to Zimbabwe. My memories are intermittent, and I suspect they are somewhat enforced by things I've heard my parents saying about when I was that age. My mother, for instance, alleges I used to run away a lot and I was a very poorly behaved child. My mother is not to be trusted and drinks heavily during the day. No, my mother is as extraordinary a person as I know, and she had to put up with me, but she inspired me a lot, and the memories that she gives me kind of sort of reinforce some of the blurry images I have of eating Bassett's jelly babies and learning the joys of Irish potato bread. And I think the real memories that I have more particularly are once I've moved to Zimbabwe. And I remember playing cricket, and the sport was all I ever wanted to do. I could play cricket for hours. I would stop random people walking past the house. Would you like to come into my house and play cricket? I also apparently used to...
Safe, yeah.
My mother says I would stop random people and say, would you like to come into the house? My mother would love to meet you. And there is a gregarious nature to me. I think you guys both know this. I'm happiest when I'm with my friends.
Yes,
I'm happiest when I'm with people. Strangely, when I walk into a room, if there are 500 people, it's a bit easier than sometimes if there are 12 people, you don't really know them.
Yes.
And I'm infinitely more comfortable standing on a stage in front of those 500 people, because then that's my space and I own it and I can tell you what to do. But the memories through the childhood are always really good. And if I look at, we could never have, for instance, balloons as kids at parties, because my father had been walking, and I think I've got this story right, where I'd been walking along a street and a bus had blown up down the street, and that's the times of Belfast. And I think it was an IRA bombing. Again, I might have that slightly wrong, but that's the memory I have of why we couldn't do that. And so there were lots of things that weren't great, but I remember the good ones and the things that made me happy. And Zimbabwe, now, unfortunately, it's a case study for a lot of things that haven't gone quite so well.
Absolutely.
But from 1982 until 1998, when I went down to Cape Town to go to university, it was a blissful place to live. It had the weather of South Africa. It had incredible people. It was just a really, really wonderful place to grow up in, and to grow up in a very innocent way. And I'm very glad I have that, and it does shape some of how I try and look after my kids and try and keep them away from nasty things like screens and put them on my own innocence.
And it's impossible.
I find that fascinating. Most people that I know that have a similar kind of backstory and grew up in Zim at that time have exactly the same feeling. How do you think? Do you feel that gave you an advantage in terms of the South African landscape and culture? And do you feel different to the average South African that kind of was raised during the same time?
I think I do feel different. I'm not sure if it's all about Zimbabwe. I've had a very, very checkered background, a bit of a cultural mongrel, the year in Australia, the time in Northern Ireland, but also growing up with very progressive parents and parents who were they were wonderful teachers. My mum read to us for hours as children, reading Tolkien, reading Lewis, reading the books that shaped my love of reading.
Yeah.
My father still is an artist. As an artist, he's wildly eccentric, but was always a very loving person, and also loved sport, and that shaped a lot of my love of sport. So I think there are lots of points where the Venn diagram is very much there.
Yeah.
But then there are others where you don't, for better or worse, have exactly that same point of connection. And I think the trick is not to focus on that difference as a negative or something that sets you apart. It gives you a unique aspect. And for me, I think it's been quite useful in terms of what I do, because I speak to a lot of very different audiences, whether I'm on stage or on television, and I like to think I can connect with a reasonably broad selection of them.
Absolutely.
And also, having a lot of different touch points reminds you, or you've got your own differences, so does everybody who's listening to you. And so you try and find ways of bringing people in and bringing people together.
Yes.
South Africa is this absolutely mad country where in the space of 30 seconds we're talking about how, we celebrate our diversity, but then, we want to keep a certain culture alive and strong. And those are very contrasting philosophies,
deeply conflicting,
and yet somehow we juggle them, and I like to think we get them right more often than we don't. And we're also a wonderfully bipolar country. Either the Springboks have just won, and we are the greatest nation in the history of the world ever, or we've just watched Carte Blanche, and we're moving to Perth with the family tomorrow. I love South Africa. I really do.
It's incredibly interesting for me because I find you so fascinating as an individual. Quite simply because I've never met anybody that has the same texture as you. And the reason I asked the question about, do you think there was an advantage to being raised the way you did, and then spending your adult life in South Africa? Because I think you feel like you've got a very different texture, and at the same time, you are one of the most humble people I've ever met, but you're the type of, that humility that terrifies you. Like, I'm also very scared of you as a human. I mean, I'll take you in a physical fight, but a battle of wit, I feel like I would lose. I would lose terribly. So you have this deep humility. And then at the same time, my fascination comes from one of my early mentors saying a sentence that I think really relates to you. And he said, you will be successful in your life when you realize that relationship capital will outweigh financial capital every single day of the week. You are one of the most networked individuals I have ever met, and you do so well to invest in that network. What is that all about, and where does that come from?
When I was 16, turned 17, I spent that year in Australia. I probably spoke to 100-odd schools, community groups, Rotary clubs. It was Rotary, a wonderful organisation who sent me on Rotary Youth Exchange. Yeah. And without realising it, that did two things. It gave me a love of speaking and understanding how to connect with an audience. Yeah. Most of these guys, the internet had barely started. Most people didn't have a clue what Zimbabwe was. I still remember one of the teachers in one of my classes asking me about the war. Yeah. And about the problems with it. And it took about 20 minutes to work out that he was meaning the Balkan crisis, because Zimbabwe was obviously part of that. Yeah. So it allowed me to speak. But it also, I'd meet somebody in March, and in April, a phone call would come through. Would you like to come out on our boat? Would you like to come and have dinner? And that was an early understanding of bringing people together. And I do spend a lot of time doing that now. Somebody will get hold of me, Dan, we need a comedian for an event. I really need a space to host my dinner. Can you put me in touch with somebody who can come and sort out something in my house? And I'm not a terribly spiritual or religious person, but I do believe these things come back and
I feel like
people.
Because I think you're articulating it, but I feel like just so that anybody watching has context for the magnitude of this, because you're saying it very gently, but I really want people to get a feel, because it's an abnormal networking ability, but it's also an
abnormal is a word often used with me.
Yes, yeah. So 2 examples. The first is, if you ever having a casual glass of wine and conversation with Dan, expect to hear things like, and then what happened is I came out of the bathroom and Hugh Grant said to me, I'm not happy with what you said about me on stage. You did the same thing last year. Like, Dan will name drop a person where you go, it can't be. Then the second you doubt him, he will prove it to you in the most subtle, beautiful way. So I lost one of my best friends, Brian Wallace. You remember Wally? A couple of years ago. Wally was the biggest Liverpool fan, and this is how I came to fall in love with Dan Nicholl. So I'd met Dan once. I think I'd been on his show once, or maybe I hadn't even been on the show, but I'd met Dan, and Dan had all of these contacts and knew all of these people. Brian gets sick with cancer, and my brain goes, let me try and take him to Anfield because he's a Liverpool supporter. Let me try and take him to Anfield and do this as his parting gift. He's got 6 months to live, literally. I call Dan. Dan doesn't know me. I'm just Jason. I call Dan. Dan, the guest says, yes, I do remember. I said, listen, this brave man is in this situation. I don't know who to reach out to. Do you know anybody at Liverpool that can make this experience crazy? Dan is busy, and he goes, yes, I do. Here's the story. I'll come back to you. Dan calls me the next day, and he says, okay, cool. This date or that date. I go, okay, what's happening? He says, no, which day do you want to go to the stadium? I say, cool, the second date. He says, the club have asked, who would you like to be in the presidential suite? So who's your friend's favorite player? I say Stevie G. He says, okay, cool. That can be
make that happen.
That can be arranged. Then he says the only problem is, does your friend have a suit? Because if you're going to sit in the presidential suite at Anfield, you've got to wear a suit. I say this can be arranged.
So one thing we'll pay
I think
for.
I was more worried about you having a suit.
No, you were, but it was a nice, again, just being nice. I then speak to Wallace, and by this point, he's too sick, and he says to me, listen, it means I'm going to spend a week of my 6 months away from my kids, and I'd rather I appreciate the offer, but I think I'm too ill, and we're not going to. I then call Dan back and go, listen, this is the story. The next thing, get a video from the club. What is that bra's name? A Liverpool legend. As an Arsenal player, you delete the names. But
was it Kenny Dalglish?
I think it was.
Was it Dalglish?
Yeah.
I think it was Kenny.
So
if you couldn't understand a word of it, it was definitely Kenny Dalglish.
But so Liverpool fans, think about what I'm saying here. I get a video from Kenny saying, listen, we've heard, this was after Brian had passed. I get a video from Kenny on behalf of Liverpool Football Club to say, we will recognize him as an honorary member forever. I still want to cry every time I think about this.
No, I remember the story.
And if ever you want to come to the club and celebrate your friend's life, we would love to celebrate him with you. From Liverpool, from Dalglish. So I want you to understand, even the people behind the camera are now starting to realize when I say Dan is one of the. So it's not just that you're so connected, but I feel like if Dan likes you, there is no rock too big to move for you. Then, if Dan doesn't like you,
he will drop the rock on you.
Yes.
You will catch rocks for days.
So I relate to that because I'm that type of guy. I always go, I'm either your best friend or your worst enemy. Does that ring any sense to you? Like I'll do anything for you until I won't. What's that all about?
About probably 15 years ago, so it would have been about 9. I was at an event. I was doing an event for one of the telecoms companies, and I was hosting the evening. And as I was walking in, I saw a friend of mine who was a fairly senior business executive. And he said to me, are you hosting this evening? And I said, yes, I am. He said, well, I'll wait for the abuse then. And I said, that's not very kind. I'd never do that. That would be most unlike me. And he stopped me and he put his, and I always remember this because in retrospect, it's completely true, but I'd never thought about it. Yeah. He said, no, I've been in more than enough rooms where you've been hosting. You never pick on anybody you don't like. Ooh. And I wouldn't go as far as to say there's a hatred or your worst enemy.
Yes.
I will give time. And for me, time can sometimes mean putting a spotlight you on the audience and having a bit of fun at your expense. But because you are my friend or because I like you or because I feel there's a relationship there. And if I don't, it's not that I'm burning effigies of you and sticking pins in dolls of you. No. I'm just simply stepping away and I'd rather keep to the good energy and focus on the people I like. And when you asked me about kindness at the very start, where happiness. So many people have done so much for me
Yes.
over the years, and I remember that. And it was Brian Hoffman who gave me the Rotary Youth Exchange Scholarship, and it was Martin and Janine van Bunigen who set up the Dutch Trust Fund Scholarship that allowed me to get to university, and it was a mad German restaurateur who gave me a job as a barman and as a waiter, and it was Suzanne Stevens from Bright Rock who said, yes, we will sponsor your television show, even though you made a pilot in a school theatre on a 600 rand
My man.
budget with no electricity. And all the way through, people who said yes. And probably the one most recently, other than Suzanne, Johan Rupert, who's become a good friend, who has given me incredible opportunities. I've spent 15 years hosting the Alfred Dunhill Links Championships in Scotland. The first time I stood up there, my front row was Samuel L. Jackson, it was Michael Douglas, it was Bill Murray. And I say that simply because this was a South African who took
Yes.
a countryman, a far younger one, who nobody in that audience knew, and said, I believe in you. I'm giving you my marquee event that all of my top clients and guests from around the world come to, and I am trusting you with the microphone to host my event. Look, his team were terrified. I had
sure.
35 briefing sessions
sure.
in the space of a day. If I look at the event last year, 10 minutes before I started, I get an email from the head of the organising team. These are the things to mention, otherwise say what you want.
Because
and
they
that's
trust
because
you
the
now.
trust process
They
is
trust you.
involved.
They believe in you now.
It's,
So wait, you've been
Yes,
asking.
sorry.
You can also ask a question.
Sorry, I get excited.
So it's Nicholas, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yes.
Nicholas appreciate. No, so a thing I always ask all the parents that come to the show is, what are you teaching your kids now? What have you taught your kids about happiness? Because for me, all of the things you've mentioned are it's a keen understanding of the fact that people have helped you to get to where you are, that has made you into the person that is kind, that is caring, that is... And also, when Dan does tease you, if you don't know, it can feel like an attack. It can feel like he's slightly
In your
racist,
case it is.
slightly-
In your case it is.
Slightly, you're just like, is this brah just doing all the stereotypical jokes just about me? But it took me years to understand that it does love you, and it is a special mention. It's not
feel
just...
like you just released something of your chest.
No. Because for a long
you
time
are
I was like,
harboring.
does this bra even really like me? Is he a closet racist? And then I realized, no. He's a wonderful human being. No, because he always teased me about driving golfs and stealing cars. And I understand it's because I have this
That's
face.
good. I believe that you did. That's why I was
No.
mistaken.
Yeah, and that's why I'm saying it now here, where it can be recorded forever, that when you tease the next colored person, they must come and look here for reference.
Yes,
and
yes,
go,
yes.
no, it's
No, we
not
stand for that.
because, yeah, we will fight for you.
Yep.
That is the point. So
Thank you.
what are you teaching your kids in terms of, because, it's, your kids are growing up soft compared to the life you've had to experience, the hardships you've had to go through. It shaped you into the person, understanding, being able to see how people have assisted you in getting to where you are. For your kids, it's a very different situation. So how do you then teach them the same lessons that you learned without them going through the same struggles you had to go through?
Well, they're now almost 10 and almost 8. A year ago, I made them leave the house and get a job, so they have got tougher. It is
How do we take
probably it's the great conundrum of probably every generation of parenting. Our parents said,
Yeah.
"Oh, what are we doing with our kids? The television's going to kill them. It's Satan in a
You're gonna
box."
get square eyes. Yeah.
And
Satan in a box.
but it is something I worry about every single day, because the world around us is not a kind one, and the algorithm of the planet does not drive the good. The front page of a newspaper does not tell you that 8 billion people didn't die in a plane crash yesterday. It told you that 12 did.
Yeah.
And the bad news sells the story, and it permeates into so much of what we do. And so, above all, I love my daughter to go on and start her fashion label. She does fashion classes every weekend. She's very gifted in that, and she loves it. She's passionate. My son's already said he's going to play for Manchester United. Having watched them last season, he could probably do so at the moment. But if there's
I'm
anything...
still celebrating my team here.
If there's anything I really want to headline, whoever they are, whatever they do. And I think particularly when you sit with some sort of public profile, and you often get asked about this, yeah, and this is going to sound a little glib perhaps, but I want them to be kind, because it really is something that is so missing in so much of our interaction. We watch the madness of war and the whichever side you look at, the destruction that happens in so much of the world. You see children in areas of conflict, and it's heartbreaking as a parent. And so impressing upon kids what's real in the world. When you guys did the show last week, Jason, you gave a great answer in terms of not being validated by likes and by follows. And even at the age of almost 8 and almost 10, I've got to impress that upon the kids. And I like to think there's a reasonable job being done of all the moments I'm proud of with my son. It was a few years ago, we were driving past, and there was a person on the side of the road who was going through a rubbish bin. And he asked me why, and I tried to explain. These sorts of questions are never easy to answer when dealing with a child. And I explained that, unfortunately, some people don't have money and they're looking for food, and it's very difficult. And we drove on another 50 meters. We were going to pick up my daughter, and he asked if we could go home. I said, well, Hayden, we're going to go and get Erin. We're going to go and pick her up. Why do you need to go home? No, Daddy, I've got some money in my money box, and I can give it to that lady, and she can buy some food. And that innocence, partly it said to me, you should have thought about that, you selfish old man. But the fact that was just his natural response. And that kind of response gets engineered out as you get older.
Absolutely.
And you drive through the traffic lights and you don't notice the same woman and child who've been there for the last 100 days. And then, there's a great line that Stuart Taylor, who's one of my favourite people and a great friend of mine, uses, where he talks about Constantia, where he lives in his 12-bedroom home, where he talks about Constantia being the kind of suburb where you're walking through, people will step over a homeless person to pick up a lost puppy. And it is that sense of what is your perspective and how is your life shaped. And you can only direct your kids' lives so much, but I want them to be friends with good people, with good parents. I want them to always think of other people and to try and be kind, to grow up as people who want to contribute and to give back. And a friend of mine, when he had kids, said to me very simply, get your kids to be outdoors more and to read more. So I'll come home often, I've picked up the kids from school, and my son wants to play cricket for 2 hours, and I know I've got a pile of work to get done.
No, but he's also a bit of a bully.
Oh, yeah, well,
if you visit Dan's house, whether you enjoy playing cricket or not, you're playing cricket. So what he does is he will just set it up. He will just set it up, and all of a sudden he'll just give you a bat, and the next thing you know, he'll drag you to your position, and you will be bowled at. You will be bowled at, and you will play cricket until the cricket is done. And then you'll all of a sudden find yourself involved.
And I love that, because it means he's not on the screen. He's not watching somebody do Minecraft commentary while somebody else plays a video game and stuff that in my declining years I cannot get my head around. And we engage because they're still at an age where I'm still a pretty cool dad, and the kids want to hang out with me, and we're friends.
And if you can teach them that you're cool now, they will believe that you are cool forever,
that's true.
no matter
That's
how
true.
uncool you are. I have a 15-year-old who still thinks I'm cool as well.
Well, technically, you guys are pretty cool parents. I will give you that. Is the only compliment I'll pay you. Talk to me, Dan, about balance then, because your life can't be all the things that I observe it to be. Because from the outside, you are never at home. You are a Laureus ambassador, which that amongst all of the other crazy charitable things that you do. I mean, you're about to go ride a bicycle somewhere, which I'm sure you'll tell us about in a second, but you always seem to be on a flight. You're always hosting some of the biggest events, not only in South Africa, but in the world. Yet 90% of the time when I call you, you're on your way to fetch a kid from either school or taking them to a practice or telling me about how excellent the soccer game was yesterday and how your lighty either scored runs or scored goals in all of the different things.
Game.
So it's like balance, because yourself and your fro are both incredibly busy people, yet you seem to make time to get the family dynamic right.
You have to.
It is the biggest challenge. First point to make, mostly because it's it's a very true and very accurate comment, but also because she is a lawyer, my wife is an absolute superhero.
Yeah,
And
no doubt. She's also, Dan is like the three of us. We are in the same WhatsApp group. We married way out of our leagues. Way. When you see Dan and his wife, expect to feel like he's the assistant.
Because we are fun.
Expect to ask questions like, yo, he must have money.
He's a good earner.
Facts. Facts. Continue there.
Yeah. So Dee is extraordinary. She runs 5 jobs at the same time. She is one of the most remarkable people I know. And on top of that, manages to be an incredible mum. You probably don't want to get on the wrong side of an argument with her. I did once 11 years ago, and I've avoided that ever since. And she's also very understanding of who I am and what I do. And the balance is really difficult. And it's got to a stage now, every week you'll get a request to do something, to go somewhere, to have some fun. And I've had to try and pare it down to, okay, if something comes through, is it lucrative? Is it going to help the kids to go to university? Is it going to help look after the family? Is it going to be a great opportunity in a really positive sense? Am I doing something very meaningful for charity? Am I doing something that's really going to help me going forward with my career, with who I am? Is it going to be loads of fun? And that loads of fun has to be third on that list. And a lot of the time that is going to be absolutely amazing. Yes, Kardashian family, I'd love to join you in a jacuzzi for the weekend in Las Vegas. But unfortunately, Legends under 8s are playing Benoni under 8s away on Saturday morning, and I shall be on the sidelines watching and cringing as parents shout at small children on a football field.
Yeah. You mean that?
Yeah.
No, because a lot of people say that. I can tell you now, it frustrates Dan if you've made a commitment and choose a bigger check over that commitment.
Yeah.
In the gig economy, it's a common thing for somebody to have made a commitment to a charitable fund or to a friendly thing, or even just to show up at a golf day, whatever it is. You get a big job come in, and it's so easy to take the money over the relationship. And it's something that, as your friend, I've observed is you are not that guy. You'll turn down all the money to make sure that you stick to a commitment. And because you're that guy, it's highly offensive for you when somebody doesn't act the same. But it's not easy. Like, your debit orders have you hostage. You're the type of guy that always seems to make the right decision.
I love the fact that he keeps, and he does this all the time, he keeps talking about these debit orders.
Yeah.
He owns 11 sports cars, and he keeps talking about debit orders.
Because Saz is going to look at both of us. So, no, but I have to agree. And I think, Jay, if you put it into context, I think Dan is the embodiment of our saying in the business about doing the right things for the right reasons. It's and combine that with the understanding of the importance of relationship capital, I think it becomes then an easy decision to go, no, thank you, Miss Kardashian. My light is playing ball. Because also I believe that you have to get to a stage in your career where you can turn down, where you can decide.
I agree with you, but Dan is able to do for all the way I'm able to do for those I like. So if I like you, I'm coming to your birthday. I'm going to not take the money. But if I don't like you, I'm not coming. Whereas if Dan has said yes, like you or not, he's coming. And that's the so the reason I'm bringing it up,
Samuel
I'm
L.
just
Jackson, you perform for who?
No, but it's I'm tired of us pretending that. So Dan's way is the right way, but it's not the common way. You know what I mean? So I'm saying that you're absolutely right, but it's also not what's commonly done by everybody. So how do you then get to that point? I think I've gotten a lot better with it, honestly, through your influence.
You gave me a discount to come to my birthday party last year. I was very touched.
I always do, Dan. You're on my list. You're on my list. But
there's a risk of me sounding a little pious in terms of that approach.
I want pious, Dan. The people need to meet.
Yeah, but it's
conscious.
I think it comes back to the number of people who've done things for me. And so I like to back. And it's certainly not perfect. And there have been a couple of occasions, never for the money, but where there's been an opportunity where I've gone to an organisation and I've said, look, I'm really sorry. I had said to these people in advance, I will be available or I would like to do this. They hadn't come to me with a date. This is something that's very important for me to do, not for a paycheck, but because it has a greater meaning. However, I would like to offer this person to come in and do the job for me, or cover it, or help out in some other way, or is it possible to change the date and I will cover the costs if there are any in doing that. And I think if you're very open and upfront about that and you're very honest about it, and communication is probably the thing that most men are really not very good at, particularly when it's at home, long searing silences. But yeah, if you, and I get it wrong frequently, but if you can try and make people understand things as early as possible, have those conversations, it makes it a lot easier. But also, again, I like doing the things that I get a kick out of them. It's quite selfish. I go and do a cool charity event. You come away, you feel good. You've helped people. It's a really good feeling. It's not, oh, look at this incredible person who's given something to the small homeless penguins. Or no, it's not about that. You actually come away going, you know what? We live in a pretty nasty world. I've got kids growing up with a massive gulf between them and so many other children in this country. If I'm not doing something that's starting to narrow that chasm, then the world my children grow up in is not going to be nicer than the one they're in now. And then there's less opportunity of them looking after me with me doing nothing in my retiring years. And I think that's important.
I love that. Oof. I love you so much, Dan, first of all. So much. Some of the things that I admire most is, and where I relate hard, is you're very much, so I relate to the fact that all the things that you've spoken about doing, you do them all with the same amount of effort. So whether I've watched you hosting the Reach for a Dream golf day, or whether I've watched you hosting the Nando's Fireball. I bring those two up specifically because the one is a charity golf day, which you do for free, and the other is the biggest and most powerful golf day in the country, I'd like to think. And if you don't know now, you know. There's no golf day that compares to that one. And I've been with Dan on big ones, big ones. There's something about that one. Yet the effort I see from you is exactly the same, for free or for all the money. Is there something in that consistency that adds to your happiness, or is it just a standard that's been ingrained in you?
I think, and you guys are far more accomplished performers and entertainers than I am. I get to stand up on stage from time to time and have fun doing it. But when you walk off that stage, it doesn't really matter who that audience is in many ways. I mean, yes, you know, okay, there's cool famous person, there's wealthy influential person. You're human, you do notice these things. Yeah. But you walk off and your audience has been laughing and they're coming and saying, oh, that was a really cool evening. I really enjoyed that. That was a lot of fun. And I think our role, because you can get a little bit caught up in your own importance once you develop a certain level of personality, and somebody's stopped you in the shops and they've asked for a selfie, and it's only once they've left they've realised you're somebody else. But you get that, okay, you know, I'm doing okay. People starting to know me. And then you fall into that trap of thinking that when you're on the stage, especially in a corporate space, that it is about you. And I think even when you're doing stand-up comedy, and I say this as an observer and a fan.
Oh, Dan has watched me take it in the teeth also. He's watched me try and leave out the back door because I've died.
I've opened it for you.
Yes. No lies.
I think you have to understand that as much satisfaction as you're getting from that, it is about the people on the floor. And if they walk away saying, God, that was a great evening, I really enjoyed that, I had so much fun, then you have done your job. And the majority of my work in that space is at a corporate level, or it's for a charity or for a foundation. They are the client. They have to be happy. Why will they be happy? Because their audience, because their guests, because their people have gone, gee, that was such a good night. And I might have facilitated it. You guys might have facilitated it. But ultimately, they're the ones getting the credit. And if they are either giving you the check or they're giving a check to that charity, then you've done your job. And you have to keep remembering that, especially when you do, I think pre-COVID, it's getting back there, but pre-COVID, there were maybe 150 events a year I was doing. It was too much, and it was manic. But something has to keep you motivated and keep you going. And it's that remembering of why you're doing what you do. Yes, there's a satisfaction. Yes, I could be an accountant in Midrand. Instead, somebody's paying me money to stand on stage and have fun, and then giving me dinner and some wine afterwards. But also, no, it is for those people you're having that dinner with, and that's so important to remember.
For me, I love that that little bit of selfish. It was the thing that I also discovered. A lot of the things I do for everybody is just for my own personal.
Because it feels
satisfaction.
Nice. Feels
yeah,
good.
It makes me feel so
How many
good.
times have you dropped a line or given a joke and like 3 people in the room have laughed or picked it up, but that was your favourite moment of the night
Yeah.
because you knew what it meant?
No, my favorite is when one person laughs. Where I say something and one person laughs. Because I go, you got what I was trying to say.
You
one
drink as
person
much as me.
got what I was trying to say. It's it's a beautiful thing, man. I love it.
Dan, you present as a happy person. One of the most consistent people I've ever met. And that when I say that, it means when I've met you, when you're about to go on stage to do your show, you're the same guy. When we've met casually, you're the same guy. Is there a lot of work that goes into managing your mood? Because you present as happy. So maybe it's 2 questions. Is there a lot of work, and are you happy?
I go back to that Liam Neeson line of being content. Generally, I am happy, though. I get to do stuff on my own terms. There's a great variety to what I do. One night I'm hosting a charity auction. The next I'm filming some TV. The day after that, it's a gala dinner. There's some terrific travel, and I'm addicted to travel. I love seeing the world and exploring it. So I get to do something I enjoy. There is a lot more work that goes into it. Like I suggested earlier with those one-man shows, the easier something looks, generally the more work has gone into it.
Yeah.
If you're A.B. de Villiers at the
Yeah.
Priest, then no.
Yeah.
But generally that is
A.B.
the easier it looks. The more work has gone into it. But the kind of work that we do, and I've failed dismally in trying to get my wife to believe this, but me playing golf with clients, well, that's work. Me sitting and watching some television, you're learning, you're picking up cultural reference points, you're seeing what other people are doing. You're not trying to copy or mimic them, but you're understanding, how is this person engaging with an audience? How are they taking a space? And for me, that's important, because if I touch down in New York to host a conference, all right, so if I drop a joke about Kaiser Chiefs haven't won a game since I was 3, which I think is just about right, then nobody's going to understand it. But if that then becomes about...
While he was still in Belfast.
if that comes about the New York Mets, okay, now, so what is your point of connection? So understanding that local culture, who are the fall guys for the jokes that you might tell, for the lines you might deliver. Find out, all right, who is the CEO, who's the big person, because with all of these organizations, and you guys know this well, most of the company can never say anything about the big boss. We can on stage.
Oh, yes.
They love it.
And we take prison rules. We go after the big boss first.
And the big bosses generally love that.
They do.
Because
Humanizes them.
they know exactly why. So, which is a very roundabout way of saying, I love what I do. I'm not always in a wonderful, happy, cheerful mood. When I used to come back from the Dan Nicholl show, it was a very stressful space, because as well as hosting it, I was the executive producer, but the key job was getting in the guests, and we'd have people cancel on the day. And unfortunately, there's only one person who's got the phone book to try and find somebody who can come in. God knows your wonderful sister Kate helped me out on so many occasions. But my wife wouldn't phone me on the day we were shooting. She was terrified that something might have gone wrong. And I'd come home, I'd cheat day. There was zero conversation. I'd collapse onto the couch, watch something inane on television, and by the next day I was back up on my feet again.
Sport or wine? Choose one. So I know both of those things make you happy. Choose one.
It is possible to play golf with a bottle of Pinot Noir on the cart.
I'll accept that as an answer. I bring that up because I feel like, as your friend, a lot of your happiness also stems from the fact that you allow yourself to enjoy the things that you enjoy. So you're incredible at providing joy, and making sure that everybody around you has as much as possible of what they want. But you also seem to make time for the things that you love. sport, golf, as you brought it up. Wine, I know, is a particular passion, and then spending all this time with the kids. Do you think there's something in that, in terms of being able to live the happiest version of your life, where you do unreasonable things? And when I say do unreasonable things, you have the best wine cellar of anybody that I know personally. It's the stuff of movies and legend. It has 2 stories, Nicholas. You know what I mean? Your house has 2 stories. His wine cellar has 2 stories. I wish I was joking. So is there something in spoiling yourself as well?
Yeah, look, with the wine cellar, it was designed to imagine Joanne Strauss presenting top billing from it. And I think we got that right.
Yeah, it's better than your house. I'm not even lying, because it's better than his house. I'm not even lying.
I've mentioned kindness a number of times, and I think being kind to yourself is so important. We find acknowledging some of the social engineering that creates a lot of the mental illness and the mental unhealth and the challenges that we have, that all of us do to some degree or another. And I think being kind to you and spoiling yourself is important. Look, it's not always easy to do. Again, we're all in a fortunate space. People give us cool stuff and we get to have great experiences. But if I look, I've got the most wonderful, wonderful parents-in-law, and they are the 2 hardest working people I know. They love you too. They came to your show. My mother-in-law said she would drive back from the Free State to come see you guys.
Salt of the earth.
They are a Greek arranged marriage. I could not love 2 people more. The only thing I wish they do is spoil themselves a little more, because they always do so much for everybody else, including ourselves. And if Dee and I are going off somewhere, they will jump in the car and drive up to look after the kids for a few days. And they're the kind of people, if I phone them at 3 a.m, that live down in Virginia and the Free State, the Venice of Northern Free State, and say, look, unfortunately, Jason's car is broken down on his way from relieving it from its previous owner in the middle of the night. He needs some help. Agathokli will get up at 3 a.m, and he'll drive, and he will help you, and he'll remove the fingerprints.
And, see, there's also
and I think they're people who do so much for other people, could do a bit more for themselves, and there's a balance to be had. And because I travel so much, I'm away all the time, I try on at least 1 or 2 of my international trips to take Dee with me, so we're away from the kids. And before that sounds horrible, you terrible parent, we come back to the kids so much happier because we've had some time on our own, we're re-energized, and they've got better parents for it. But I also try and take the kids away to some of the things we're doing and give them an understanding, because it was a bit confusing, especially when they were younger. Daddy, why does that person want a photo? You've never met them. Why is that person saying hello? Who is that person? And so kind of understanding who I am, what I do. And so getting that balance of, you got to work hard and go to school. Daddy's got to go and do an event, go and do something. But next weekend, we're going to do this. Next month, we're going there. And that sense of balance, rewarding yourself, because tomorrow you could have a meteorite land on your head and bang, do you want your last memory to be that you spent 6 days straight doing your taxes and going to gym? Probably not.
No, not at all.
We could talk to you forever, Dan, but we do have to do
and we do see that you surround yourself with the right people. I think that's a very important
to my left
key.
and to my right.
And no, just your in-laws, your wife, your kids, and everybody, and yes, us as well. Thank you. Like as you speak, I feel like we have very similar mindsets and mentalities, and think this similarly in terms of just kindness and caring about the person next to you, the next person. And it's a beautiful thing to experience, and I'm honored to have
There's another one because she's allergic to social media and last.
And she wasn't a mayor.
Well, she last answered her phone in 1986. But we're all incredibly close, and I've had this wonderful initial family and then this wonderful new Greek family. And amongst many things, it gives you that crucial sense of balance, because especially in our kind of industry where it can be lots of highs and lows. You've done a gig for 1,000 people and nobody phones you for 3 weeks, and it's not, and we project good times, but I'm lucky in that good times often back it up, and it's not a facade, and I'm very grateful for that.
it feels like you've been very intentional about your life. Intentional about the relationships, intentional about the types of people you've allowed to stay in that, especially your inner circle. I mean, you speak very lightly about and very beautifully about how lovely everybody is. But I also feel like you've been very intentional about who you allow and what type of human being you allow to be specifically in that inner sanctuary of yours.
I think so. My wife sometimes raps me gently on the knuckles. Actually, not very gently at all. She's stronger than I am. She sometimes feel I bring too many people in, but I love sharing, and I love spending time with people. And I often think that because I'm in such a fortunate space and I get to do such cool stuff, it's so important to share it with other people. And if I look, I went to the final of the rugby at Loftus. The Bulls were playing Glasgow, and went and joined the team at Brightrock. And they'd very kindly given me 4 tickets, and my wife couldn't make it because Giancarlo, the Italian pool guy, was coming around to check the pool for the 4th time that week. So she and my daughter were off having some fun and doing some stuff. And so we took along one of my son's close friends and his dad. And his dad's Ghanaian now in South Africa, amazing sports teacher, really cool guy. His son's brilliant centre forward, but kind of hospitality box, rugby, it wasn't a space they'd really spent time in before. And seeing their experience through their eyes of something I get to do quite often was such a reminder, hey, just don't take this for granted. You get to do cool stuff. Make sure that you appreciate it. And you do need that sometimes. Yeah, I take people who haven't been, and your show was a great example. I took my parents-in-law, they'd never been to a stand-up comedy evening. So I thought, all right, well, we'll start at the bottom and work our way up. But I took them along to that. And they phoned me 2 days later to retell me some of the lines that you had given. And this was, here we go. I get to do stuff that gives people so much joy, and other people don't get to do it nearly as often. And being able to bring people into that is, you're just really fortunate to be able to do that.
No, strictly love.
Dan Nicholl needs to start doing comedy next week.
No, Dan must not start doing comedy because Dan is funnier than all of us.
Yeah.
If you don't
And he
trust
has
me,
enough jokes.
go and speak to any comedian that's been on the Dan Nicholl show. The comment we always get is, how is his wit quicker than a comedian's wit? And I say that because we are quicker. We're quicker just like a sprinter's quicker in certain things because we exercise that muscle all the time. Dan has the ability to still outflex us. We have to wrap it up. We're going to wrap it up with the Goliath Happiness Index, which for the first time will be done properly. So Dan, we got 3 categories. We can ask you to rate where you believe you are. 1 being the lowest, 5 being the highest. So 1 being the worst, 5 being the best. Obviously, it's gap, and we are now filling the gap with the Goliath Happiness Index. So it's gratitude, acceptance, perspective. And we want to ask, where are you, or where do you rate yourself 1 to 5 on those 3, starting with gratitude?
I genuinely think I'd have to go 5. I'm incredibly grateful for everything, and I think we've been here for 7 hours now because you've refused to let me out. I think it's the gratitude is immense. My work day includes hanging out with 2 people who are not just 2 of the funniest I know, but 2 of the coolest, and this is just one element of what's going to be a really fun day.
We receive
amazing family, incredible kids. I'm pretty certain I was traveling 9 months before they both arrived, but I'll take it.
You see the
Giancarlo, the pool guy.
Let me tell you,
With his
Dan's
creepy
son,
hose.
Dan's son is mini-me.
Do you know that at school, the aftercare teachers call my son photocopy?
No, because it's as is the same expressions, the same
God,
as is, and then
Poor child.
no, it's crazy because Aiden looks exactly like Dan, and Aaron looks exactly like D. Like the faces are.
But also, Aiden has developed a sense of humour, and it comes through every single school report. He's a bright kid, but he's the one who makes us laugh, and I love that.
No.
Acceptance 1 to 5.
I know I slept through most of your show, and I think part of this was definitely part of it. But I'll try and remember exactly what it was.
So, do you accept who you are, where you are, what you are, why you are? Do you accept everything around you so that you can move to where you'd like to be? How good are you accepting that it is what it is?
I think, again, very good. I might go a 4, partly because if you say 5 for everything, no one's going to believe you.
Facts.
I generally do, and again, part of, I think, having a slightly varied upbringing, having come from different parts of the world, but also spent time in front of audiences at events all over the world, and that's maybe more perspective than is acceptance, but I can walk into a room and it doesn't really matter what that room is. I don't think a little bit uncertain.
No, I've never seen you uncomfortable.
So, and that's something that I'm really happy with. There's always, and there will always be, and if you argue otherwise, I won't believe you. But if you're in a broader performance or entertainment space, there's always that element of imposter syndrome, and there's always that, you watch somebody and drop a line, and you think, oh, yeah, do you think I could do that? Should I really be here? And sometimes I stand up and I look at an audience, and if it's an international, crikey, okay, should I really be here? And then an hour later, everyone's laughing. You've had a great time.
You've got them wrapped around your finger.
I'll go 4.5. How's that?
I'll take a 4.5. Last but not least, perspective. So Nicholas's line from a book that he read, it's 5% what happened, 95% how you react. Your perspective is so important. How are you 1 to 5 in terms of managing that perspective?
Again, I think it's probably between that 4 and 5 space. If there's anything that maybe doesn't make it a full 5, it's just because sometimes you are your own wood from the trees. You can't. That self-analysis always comes with a degree of subjectivity that cannot be avoided. And sometimes you'll look back on something a week later, a month later, and think, "Oh, should I have done that? Should I have gone there? Did that?"
So where can we consume Dan?
So there's a great section of Conan O'Brien that comes up quite regularly where it's Tiffany Haddish returns.
Okay.
Kaylee Cuomo returns. So I will be back just because I've had so much fun doing this. Yes, it has been a long time, but I think it will reflect in the invoice. It's we've got the new podcast, and podcasting is a very, very new space. I don't think outside of this one and mine, anybody's done one in South Africa. So if you've got a podcast machine, you can listen to the Dan Nicholl Show. And in closing, the Dan Nicholl Show now as a podcast does the one thing it couldn't do as television, which we've been able to do here, and which I love. The conventional wisdom that the marketing types will shove down your throat is that with the attention span of a 3-year-old on 6 litres of Coca-Cola, everything can't be more than 8 seconds, and it's all TikTok and shorts and reels and the like. Whereas for me, the long form content has still got such a great space. And when we did the show, we had an hour. Take out your ad breaks, take out your titles, your intros, your outros. You're down to 40 minutes, 13 minutes or thereabouts per guest. That's 8 or 9 questions.
Not enough.
If you're asking me, it's probably 2
and
questions.
they've got to be quick, banging questions. No
but you've
long-
also, you might have, Nicholas is in sparkling form. He's giving me great content. Jason's been brilliant. Everybody's laughing. And Donovan's working out how to buy his 4th Italian sports car from his Netflix contract. And so isn't really interested in being on the show, which of course would never happen because he's brilliant. But if one of your guests is not doing brilliantly, you've still got to give them the same amount of time. And just as I'm getting into a great conversation, oh, hang on, we haven't spoken to Jason. Away we go. So what I've been able to do, and I look forward to having both of you along soon, is have these conversations where you're having a lot of fun and a great deal of silliness, but you're also jumping into some really meaningful stuff. And again, going back to this world of increasingly less kindness, as I sadly so often see it, having conversations that allow people to go, hey, you know what, this is where things aren't going so right, but actually this is where they are going right, and giving some perspective that person I only know through television or sport or the screen, they have their ordinary days as well, and they have some things that aren't so cool. And And that's been a lot of fun as I descend inelegantly into middle age.
I mean, well articulated. I wish I could defend your descent, but it is what it is.
I was going to say middle
It
age.
is.
You passed, like,
So last night,
what is the middle
Maps
age?
Mapignani. I was at an event with Maps Mapignani, the celebrated influencer, because he likes to be known as an influencer. So I was with Maps Mapignani, the influencer, and he told the person he knew, he'd introduced me to me, this is Dan, it's Dan's birthday, because this is my birthday week, so this is a birthday gift for me. He said, Dan's turning 60. And the guy looked at me and goes, sure, yeah. No violent
Believable.
disagreement.
Very believable.
So I went home
It's
and
the
I
wine.
spent the night in a bath of moisturizer. And
With a glass of wine. I can see you undoing the effect, just cancelling
The problem
out.
and the cure. The problem
The
and the
cure
cure.
and the cause. Yeah.
Thank you for your time, Dan.
Thank you,
Thank you,
Slaven.
guys. Love you both.
Be
And
more
this
like
has
Dan
been
Nicholl
delightful.
in your life.
Yeah. Kinder to everybody, kinder to yourself. And also
successful
don't
and
accept
happy.
ordinary, man. Your life could be extraordinary.